Prophets. This is Dan Elliott again, Monarch of Tri-Po-Bed Grotto, with another Memorial Day message. I know some people wanted to ask me about a little bit of the history of FDR, at least the last few days of his life, which are important since this is the 75th anniversary of the passing of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So I'm going to read this to you, so just bear with me. It's only about a page and a half, but you can get all the pictures online, so I want to emphasize that, and you can go to the National Park Service, which is closed. This is the reason why we're doing our Memorial Day service in Rhinebeck. So I just want to read this to you, and then we can discuss it later on. But here's some history of his last final days of FDR. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt died unexpectedly from a cerebral hemorrhage on April 12, 1945, at Warm Springs, Georgia. At that time of his collapse, he was sitting for a portrait by the Russian-born artist Elizabeth Shomatov. During the sitting, FDR felt an intense pain in the back, at the back of his neck, and slumped forward in his chair. He was then carried into his bedroom, where he died at 3:35 p.m. Now, there is a picture online. If you go to the website, you can see his final picture. It's not even completed, that Elizabeth was painting of FDR at that time. But you can still see the pictures online. Perhaps no sitting U.S. president was more active in designing his memorial legacy than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. By his second term in office, FDR was planning the presidential library and the preservation of his home, gifts to the people of the United States. He also expressed his wish to be buried in the Rose Garden at his family home in Hyde Park, and even outlined the details for a simple monument to mark his grave. During the later years of his life, FDR designed what would become the tangible monuments of his legacy. Under his influence, Congress enacted legislation in 1939 to create the FDR Library and Museum. The same year, FDR deeded 16 acres to the United States government for the nation's first presidential library. Designed by Roosevelt and built with private funds, the library was completed in 1940 and became a model for all future presidents. 3 years later, in 1943, Secretary of the Interior Harold Ickes accepted a deed from FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt for the family home and 33 surrounding acres. On January 27, 1944, this property was designated the home of FDR National Historic Site. It opened to the public on the first anniversary of the president's death in 1946. More than 500,000 people visited annually during the immediate years following his death. President Roosevelt made his last journey from Warm Springs on the morning of April 13, 1945. His bronze coffin, covered by the American flag, followed the procession from the little White House between double ranks of 2,000 servicemen en route to the funeral train for Washington. The roll of muffled drums added a solemn mood to the slow-moving cortege, which paused momentarily where all of the patients of his infantile paralysis foundation were assembled. The train moved slowly through the night, passing stations filled with silent crowds gathered in reverence to watch as the president passed by. At Union Station, the procession continued with full military escort along Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House for a funeral service in the East Room. That evening, the funeral train embarked on the final length of the journey in the Rose Garden at Hyde Park. 300 people waited in silence. On the morning of April 15th, the approaching sound of Chopin's funeral march, performed by the West Point Band, signified the horse-drawn occasion was climbing the hillside through the woods toward the president's final resting place. The monument marking FDR's grave was executed to the president's design by the Vermont Marble Company in Proctor, Vermont. For more than a century, marble was used in construction of the important public buildings and monuments, including many of the nation's finest structures: the Jefferson Memorial, the U.S. Supreme Court building, and eventually the United Nations headquarters in New York City. FDR specified that a plain white marble monument without carving or decoration be placed at his grave, situated east and west, measuring 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 3 feet high, with a base extending 2 feet around the perimeter. The memorial stone was manufactured to President Roosevelt's design and installed in the fall of 1945. According to the President's wishes, Mrs. Roosevelt was interred here upon her death in 1962. Again, Prophets, if you'd like to see the more information, you go to the National Park Service, the home of FDR website, and there's also all the pictures there, and they're outstanding photographs for you to look at when you get an opportunity. Now, I'd just like to point out a couple of facts. Now, if some of you have been there, and I'm talking to the youth groups and all the other organizations that join us every year, if you've been there, you've seen that big stone, and now you know why it looks like that, because FDR wanted it to look like that, and that's what he got, and that's where it is. That's why it is where it is. So that's that. And those of you who hopefully will be doing this next year and get an opportunity to go there, and you'll be able to see his monument, and it's also a very solemn time that we have there. However, I also wanted to add another little fun fact tidbit for you, that not only that FDR but also Eleanor Roosevelt were trustees at Vassar College, and many of you know that your monarch still works at Vassar College, and so to work at a place where two of them were trustees is quite an honor, and it's something I don't take lightly. As you know, Vassar College is in Poughkeepsie, New York, and that's where FDR was a trustee, and Eleanor Roosevelt actually served as a trustee for a very long time there. So it's quite interesting, the history in our area. So again, Prophets, thank you for listening to this long message, and I hope you have a safe day. Thank you.